This is the Gen Y Leaders Podcast. Welcome to the Gen Y Leaders Podcast, where we guide millennials to become the next generation of business leaders and entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Eric Huey, and multiple times a month, we bring you interviews from high-performing millennials who are challenging perceptions and changing expectations of our generation. Our mission is to help you overcome fear, take action, and go confidently in the direction of your dreams. It's time to start preparing now, mainly because 10,000 baby boomers are retiring every day, which will create a vacuum of career opportunities that you've been waiting for. Will you be ready? Walker, welcome to the Gen Y Leaders Podcast.
Eric, thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Excited to have you. If you could just start off by telling listeners who you are and what you do.
Sure. My name's Walker Deibel. I guess I consider myself an acquisition entrepreneur, right? And about what I do, I sort of have three baskets, right? So one are kind of companies that I've acquired and I'm growing. Two is anything around my book Buy Then Build, or the subsequent acquisition lab, which we created to help people find and buy companies. And number three, I work with, I'll say, an elite team of online business brokers at Quiet Light, where we help online entrepreneurs exit their business as well as people to buy them.
That's the resume of an entrepreneur for sure. Lots of stuff going on.
There's sort of three legs of the same stool, though, right? Like, it's sort of like things that I've bought. I've sold a couple of companies. I help other people buy and sell, and then the acquisition lab is interesting. I sort of think that I think that buy side, M&A advisory is really broken when it comes to the kind of like Main Street or like sub $5 million market.
Yeah.
And so the acquisition lab was kind of a solution to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very nice. So a big part of this podcast is diving into people's why or their purpose. So tell us a little bit about your why, what got you into doing all this stuff.
Sure. Great question, Eric. Thank you. So, okay. I think it's like, okay. So, I mean, if we went all the way back, Eric, it's one of these where, my dad's side of the family, they were all like small business owners, right? And my mom's side of the family, they were all, creatives. They were like artists and academics and, and so I sort of grew up, and I just remember like Thanksgiving was almost sort of like a merger of these worlds, right? like my dad's family would sort of show up early, and there was like a board meeting, and then like my other cousins would show up, but so it's always trying to connect things that don't seem to connect, right? Mm-hmm. And for me, I was always an entrepreneur, and I was always, someone who wanted to do big things and who wanted to frankly own my own company. Okay. Yeah. And I didn't know what that looked like. By the time I got to business school, I got my MBA, I started a company, and it's one of these where I realized all of like my MBA was really like training for the purpose of an MBA is to supply large organizations with middle management.
I'd agree with that. I got mine too. I couldn't agree more.
Right. And by the way, like investment banking and management consulting is the same thing, right? It's
yeah.
So and then the entrepreneurship lessons that were sort of emerging in the early 2000s, sort of like post tech bust, was when entrepreneurship started showing up in these programs.
Yeah.
And at that time, venture capital was thriving. Venture capital was the thing, that was the answer. And entrepreneurship really meant these sort of like swinging for the fences kind of things, right? Kind of like, I'm creating something out of nothing, creating a market out of nowhere. And like, now I'm on the cover of Time magazine kind of a thing, right? And that's entrepreneurship. And for me, it was like, there just always seemed to be this gap between all of the information out there and everything that was being sold. And like, we had this great startup in business school, and we were able to license this technology, and the whole thing ended up falling apart, right? And so I've known a lot of successful entrepreneurs, and frankly, if you look at the large volume of them, okay, they're not these sort of like Peter Thiel 0 to 1 kind of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
They're just, they own like 6 subways or something, and they're
Right.
like the biggest house on the block, right? You know what I'm saying? Like that, you don't have to like create mountains in order to be an entrepreneur, not really.
Yeah.
And so part of what the why behind what I do is, number one, I want to, it's been my mission to really raise awareness around acquisition entrepreneurship and explain and kind of scream from the mountaintop that, this is something that's kind of like a money ball of entrepreneurship. It's all about getting on base. It's all about existing revenue, existing infrastructure, profitable earnings, historical based valuations. None of these like, I pulled this out of thin air and now like give me, $2 million for 20% of my company or something.
Right.
So it's got a margin of safety. It's bankable. I mean, there's so many benefits to buying an existing infrastructure and going from there rather than starting from scratch. And it's like the most engaged life possible, Eric. Like it's not a entrepreneurship light. It's really not. It's a vehicle that's very similar that can advance most people to the goal quicker.
Another similarity that we have, a foundational pillar of the podcast, if you will, is this silver tsunami. And for new listeners, that really is these baby boomers that are retiring every single day at a rate of 10,000. Walker, I think I've heard you on other recent interviews say it's going upwards of maybe 11 or even 12,000 a day now, every day for the next 10, 15 years. So Walker, talk a little bit about that and maybe the exponential effect that has on younger generations to buy businesses, but also just maybe the economy as a whole as far as, generational wealth.
Yeah. So a couple things. The baby boomers that are retiring, there's an estimated $10 trillion in value of their companies. Okay.
Unreal.
Now, I want you to understand that this is actually like 42% of the US economy.
Gosh, almost half. That's unreal.
So like the thing is like the infrastructure that was built by the baby boomers came at a time when like the internet didn't exist, right? Yeah. Online marketing didn't exist. Okay. 2-day delivery certainly didn't exist. I mean, the thing is that like just what's happened in the last, call it 25 years anyway, has been a monumental change in how we do business. Okay. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, buying an existing company and transforming it is easy. It is really hard. Okay. And like the stakes are high. All right. Like you've got a lot to lose and you've got a lot to gain. Right. But you have to think to yourself, like, okay, if the world has changed around these companies, and yet there's still like 42% of the US economy, to me, it sure seems like there's kind of, in theory, right, some kind of low-hanging fruit, right, to sort of like be able to acquire these companies and then sort of change how they're functioning in order to accelerate the growth of those companies. Okay. No one's ever said this, but like you have to think that someone in the United States government sort of looked at the numbers and said, okay, like half the US economy needs to transition to the next generation. And if it doesn't transition, like we have to recreate almost half of the US economy.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's that important. So I think that's what's actually, I think that's the top secret why behind why the banks have opened up in terms of how these acquisitions are run.
Talk about a little bit about your first experience with acquisition entrepreneurship and what that experience was like.
Yeah. So Eric, it's one of these where okay. So I started telling this story. So I actually used my time in business school as a resume shield. Where, this is the time in your life where you can really progress towards your career through the academic structure of getting your MBA. Yeah. At the same time, you're allowed to be kind of off the radar in terms of what you're doing, right? In other words, I was a full-time MBA student, so I wasn't a part-time, and
Sure.
So I was hell bent to find a company. I didn't want to start my own company. Like I wanted to practice on someone else's, right?
Smart.
So yeah, my good friend and classmate Dan had essentially he ran his summer internship. Is this when it started? He ran his summer internship in LA and was able to negotiate the licensing agreement for. I'm not going to tell you that it's the same firm because I don't actually know this, but
Okay.
like real 3D, like you go to the movie theater and you wear the glasses and it's like 3D.
Yeah.
I say it like that because at the time 3D was like red and blue. Okay, like,
Right,
seriously,
sure.
like it just was. But like, so he basically negotiated the licensing agreement of he was able to obtain the licensing agreement for real 3D for point of purchase advertising.
Wow.
So we started making these big lenticular lenses.
Yeah.
Televisions had just gotten flat, so we were putting these lenticular lenses on these flatties, right? And then we were converting images, like DVD images,
Wow.
and creating 3D advertisements for like point of purchase. And like you would look at it and be like, here's a Coke bottle or whatever, and you're like, if I'm like Coke or Victoria's Secret, like I am buying this. Like there is no, and we got pretty far up the sales curve with a major retailer who wanted to roll us out nationwide.
Wow.
We started raising financing. We were in the Olin Cup competition, and the day before the award ceremony, our license got yanked.
Oh.
Eric, I put myself in the hospital. I was working so hard on this thing. Literally, I spent like 2 nights in the hospital because I got sick working on this thing so hard. And the thing is it all fell apart. And I was one of these people where we had so much traction, so much promise, so much potential that I didn't do what everyone else was doing, which was actually looking for a job. Okay.
Right.
So when this startup fell apart in May of 2004, my month of graduation, 2 weeks later, I went from it was like in a 2-week period, I went from an MBA student with a very promising startup to unemployed.
Gosh.
And I was like one of 2 people that were unemployed, because I'm the entrepreneur. The other person was like the one that isn't going to get hired anyway. You know what I mean? And people were looking at us like, yeah, no thanks. So it was kind of one of those situations. So the thing is like, this is when I understood, Eric, that like entrepreneurship isn't a job. Mm-hmm. It's more of a condition. Okay. Yep. And so it's one of these where I knew there was a way to buy an existing company. Mm-hmm. I just had no idea how to do it. So I was looking for a business part-time. And ultimately, my father showed up, okay, and said, "Hey, Walker, let's go to lunch." And he owned a book printing company, okay. And I want to be very clear with this, Eric. I don't lead with this story a lot because I've bought 7 companies. Like I've sort of like done this, but the thing is like I think that a lot of people can really quickly pull the rug out from my message and be like, his dad, he's bought it from his dad. I want you to understand. Number one, I went corporate. I did the whole thing. I had three big jobs before I bought a company. Number 2, I had a failed search. Number 3, I tried to raise capital. Number 4, number 4, the message at my household was there's no role for you here. Like go do your own thing. Wow. Okay. And so what happened was we had lunch and he said, "Hey, why don't you come over to the company?" And I said, "Well, why?" And he said, "Well, let's wait and see if you show up to work first. Let's see if you can hold a job." Huh. Or you got to be kidding me. Okay, fine. By the way, I'd been on the board of his company for about a year at this point, but whatever. The point was, so I worked at the company for a while, and then we were on the same side of the table, okay, which made it really easy and trusting. Yeah. Met with our CPAs, we met with our attorneys, and we figured out, okay, how do we transition this business? All right. A couple things happened. We did it. It was like a 27-step process. Yeah. I had a couple of major realizations with the completion of this. Number 1, everything that we've covered. Yeah. I tried to do a startup. I was in the startup community. I was trying to do all this stuff. And now, I had an $8 million company that I basically did a leverage buyout on. I took a bank loan based on the assets of the balance sheet. Mm-hmm. Wrote my dad a check. He stopped coming to work the next day. Okay. And now I had a company, and I'm like, oh my God. Number two, I was like, you got to be kidding me. And I did it for a couple of reasons, but I don't want to diversify this story. But so number two, everyone started coming out of the woodwork saying like, how did you do that?
Yeah.
And it wasn't just like my friends.
Mm-hmm.
It was like my dad's friend, like business owners in the community started coming to us being like, how did you actually transition the business? And so I realized, number one, everyone is looking at, Steve Jobs, thinking this is entrepreneurship. But what I just did seemed to be a lot more applicable.
Yeah.
And number two, no one could figure out this private capital market.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I ran that company for 7 years, ultimately sold it to an acquisition target, did a whole nother startup, which actually that second startup is the one that, because that time I was getting it right.
Yeah.
Right. And then I went off and I did end up buying another 6 companies outright. And I'm probably a minority investor in another 20 or so now. Talking about the introduction to acquisition entrepreneurship. Number one, it's the pain of startups.
Yeah.
Number two, it's the journey of the search and how frustrating and what we know now.
Yeah.
And number three was how I got that early success. And yes, it was through my dad. Oh, sorry. This is the other realization.
Yeah.
The only other people, Eric, that we're going to have this realization or experience are people just like me. Okay.
Yep.
White males that are like the oldest son of someone who owns a company.
Yep.
And that's when I was like, I need to get this out. Like I just got this information because I was in this blessed situation, and I need to, number one, put it into practice. And number two, tell everybody I know about this, because this is like huge.
Yeah, definitely. So for listeners, if you've been a long time listener, way back in I think the 20 episodes, we had a gentleman on named David Schwab, who is in somewhat of a similar business as Walker, more so on strictly the sales side as far as helping people sell their business. And we talked a little bit about this topic then, and before I found Walker, and I think the episode title there is Buy Instead of Build. So Walker, I guess we have similar mindsets when it comes to catchy titles. Walker's book is Buy Then Build. Walker, we talked, that was again with David Schwab, and we talked a little bit about kind of the introductory aspects of acquisition entrepreneurship and buying businesses. So I'd kind of like to do a second step into that. And within your book, you have what you refer to as a prep funnel and some steps as far as having a CEO mindset when you're looking for an opportunity. Can you elaborate on that as far as basics of the funnel and what to look for when somebody's out searching for their first opportunity?
Yeah. So I think that, 90% of people that decide they're going to head out and start looking for a business never actually buy one.
Yeah.
Okay. And, I really spent a lot of time thinking about, okay, why is that? And like, what does the empirical evidence kind of suggest?
Yeah.
Okay. And, I think a lot of the foundation of it has to do with a lot of what we talked about, right? It's sort of like all of these things, but opaque, fragmented, et cetera. But like, I think the big one is that a lot of times, first time buyers, they sort of look at businesses for sale in two ways. One, I'm the investor, and like this seller needs to pitch me as if it's like a startup person trying to like get my money. Okay, wrong. You're interviewing for the CEO role of that company. Okay.
Well said.
Number two, first time buyers tend to have no idea what they actually are looking for. Okay. And what I mean by that is that there's a simple, so in other words, there's two equations. The first one is it's both entrepreneurship and investing. So it's that first part. Okay. I'm interviewing for the CEO role. And the second part is it's the company plus you. Okay. In other words, if I'm looking at a listing of companies for sale, people will look at it like a menu, and they'll be like, all right, here's the chicken, here's the salad, here's the steak, here's the pasta. But like, I don't even know that I'm hungry. Like, I don't know if I'm a vegetarian or a meat eater, or I practice paleo, or and the thing is every business you look at, it's missing a key ingredient, which is you at the head of that company. every single person that goes out looking for a company starts out completely the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
And then like we said, you're going to burn a lot of time first thing. And so you already fail before you start. The prep funnel is simply, me starting out, I didn't want to write the book about me. I didn't want to write Buy Then Build about me. Okay. I wanted to write about everyone else. It was like, look at this movement happening. So I set out and I did all these interviews. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I subsequently figured out that like writing a Jim Collins like book, you sort of need like 24 Stanford PhDs to actually do it. Like, but by doing those interviews, I got a ton of information and was able to kind of synthesize them and come up with my models in terms of not only what was I doing, but what are all of these people sort of doing in this movement. So I came up with, the opportunity profiles and like the 3A's and everything that sort of makes up the funnel, ultimately coming up with a target statement that basically synthesizes your attitude, your aptitude, your daily activities, what you want to be doing every day. Okay. Sure. Your opportunity profile that fits those. Okay. And then the size in the industry that you're looking for. Looking for a company is the same thing. You need to be specific, but also kind of general enough that, specific enough that people can think of something, but general enough that you're not isolating yourself.
Right. I guess on that kind of similar vein of thinking, one point you make within that chapter is the idea of kind of leaving a little bit of white space almost. I guess the way I phrase it, those aren't your words. I think you phrase it as thinking strategically versus always having like systematic systems and processes, and having, the creative mindset, I guess, is I think what you refer to it as. Talk a little bit about that and the importance of, having a creative mind or a strategic mind as a CEO versus always worrying about small incremental steps and growth.
Okay. So, I think you might be talking about growth mindset, but you might be talking, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, that's like Carol Dweck's idea. She wrote a book called Mindset. Okay. And it all comes down to, people that have a fixed mindset are like, oh, that person is smart.
Yeah.
Or that person is dumb, right? It's sort of like these absolutes.
Yeah. Whereas
in real life, everything is sort of malleable.
Mm-hmm.
And as a CEO, when look, there's this excellent movie on entrepreneurship called Print the Legend. It's a documentary about 3D printing. Okay.
Okay.
And right at the beginning, Brad Feld says, when you're a leader, when you're a CEO, every day something comes up and smacks you in the face, right? And it's like, that's true. Okay. And the thing is that like, if you have a fixed mindset, you're going to be a goner, right? And you can harness this growth mindset, but the concept behind the growth mindset is like, okay, I could, like, this problem is malleable and I'm the one to fix it.
Yeah.
And you just get going, right? And so the thing is like, when you look at all of psychology around entrepreneurs, okay, and try to like whittle down, like, what is the thing that makes them successful at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Not a lot of people think that it's because they had a great opportunity. And it's actually not that at all.
Yeah.
I mean, think about all the people that lived right next door to Steve Jobs. You know what I mean? I mean, and if you don't like that geographic, then fine. Think of it in terms of industry, or who else saw that magazine cover that like both Bill Gates and Steve Jobs saw that led to both of those companies.
Yep.
But it's like, so everyone at that time had that opportunity. Mm-hmm. Why did they do it?
Yeah, it's great perspective.
It's the amount of drive and conviction around a specific opportunity that makes the difference.
So in this interview, we've talked about quite a bit of a spectrum. We talked about Bill Gates, Steve Jobs on one end of the spectrum, but then we also talked about pet cemeteries. So I'm curious, do you have any general, subjective perspective as far as if there's opportunity in any one sector? I know just in my experience from talking to other older entrepreneurs, they have, metal fabricating businesses and a lot of laborious type B2B industrial jobs. But their kids don't want to inherit them, or employees don't want to buy them because they're not sexy. They're not starting an Instagram channel or YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think that, I think that first time entrepreneurs are really attracted to sexy.
Yep.
I think that second-time entrepreneurs are really attracted to money. Okay?
I've never heard it put like that, but that makes total sense.
Yeah, and you know, there's a lot of let's talk about the sexiest thing out there, okay? OTM, OPM, other people's money.
Yep.
Right? Everyone's like, oh, I'm going to use everyone else's money and do all this stuff and blah blah blah. There's no accountability in that.
Right.
You know, if you're willing to sign a personal guarantee to buy a fabricating company, that's cool. Okay. Yeah. You know, I think, you know, I own a fabricating company, and I think that you know, I think that the biggest opportunity we have is sort of twofold. Okay. There's three things going on right now. It's a confluence. Number one, you've got this, you know, like 42% of the U.S. infrastructure transitioning. Okay. Right. Number two, you've got the tech wave that like those businesses did not come of age during this wave. Yep. Okay. Number three, you've got the easiest access to bank financing ever in history. Okay. For sure. So the thing is like, to me, this is a special recipe. And if you can anchor 1 foot in the old economy and 1 foot in the new economy, to me, that's the real trick. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of what we're trying to do at my fulfillment company, right? I bought a fulfillment company, and then I used the cash flow to create a proprietary e-commerce storefront that did nothing but copy Amazon. Wow. And we became an internal Amazon-like experience for business to business and supply chain functionality. Okay. So I bought an old economy business, and then I created this new economy application on top of it.
Starting to wrap up here. One of the last questions on this specific topic I wanted to address was if people are out, you know, searching for their first acquisition, what are some basic red flags? Maybe 1, 2, 3 major red flags that you always tell people to watch out for to maybe drop a deal or walk away from it.
Get your head out of the books and look at who you're buying from.
Yeah.
If at any point you do not trust the seller, shut the deal down.
Walker, one of the last questions I always ask every guest is if they have books or resources they look at. But in your case, you have both a book and a resource with Buy Then Build, which we've held up a couple times here, but then also the Acquisition Lab. Do you want to quickly plug those and how people can get in contact with you or get involved with those?
Sure. Thanks, Eric. I mean, you know, I wrote Buy Then Build. It took like 4.5 years to write it, and it took millions of dollars in my entire net worth of investing in management and like 10 years of experience. So like, it's everything I got. Okay. Yeah. And it's like $16. You know. So yeah. I think that's great. But I've got a ton of free resources on buythenbuild.com. It's just, I mean, there's a ton of free stuff there. Yeah. So I mean, that's where I would say if you're interested in learning more, go there.
Awesome. Well, Walker, thanks so much for your time and insights, and good luck to you and your continued success.
Thanks, Eric. You too.
All right. Bye-bye. That wraps up today's episode. We hope to have brought you some valuable key takeaways. Most importantly, whatever you learned, take action on it. Apply it to your life. Apply it to your career. Motivation and inspiration only come as a result of taking that first step. So if you're enjoying the podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe on whichever platform you found the show. You can also follow us on all the major social media platforms or contact us directly at genwhyleaders@gmail.com. That's GENWHY leaders@gmail.com. Until next time, I'm Eric Huey, and thanks for listening to the Gen Y Leaders Podcast.